The crowd roars like a thunderstorm, shaking the very foundations of the arena. Millions watching, both inside the packed stadium and through screens around the world, hold their breath in anticipation. This isn't just any fight. This is the ultimate showdown, a clash between two of the most feared warriors in combat sports history. On one side, the baddest man on the planet, the former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Mike Tyson. On the other, a beast unlike any other, a former UFC champion, WWE icon, and one of the most dominant athletes to ever step into a cage or ring, Brock Lesnar. Their paths, though forged in different arenas, have always seemed destined to collide. And now, finally, the fight that fans have only dreamed about is about to become reality. The energy in the air is electric, the tension almost unbearable. This isn't just about skill, power, or even legacy. It's about answering a question that has lingered in the minds of fight fans for years. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Tyson, the man who redefined boxing with his vicious knockouts and unparalleled aggression, faces off against a monster who has torn through the world of combat sports with raw strength, wrestling dominance, and sheer intimidation. It's not just a battle between two men. It's a clash of styles, eras, and fighting philosophies. The journey to this moment has been anything but ordinary. Tyson, a name synonymous with destruction, made a career out of dismantling opponents in seconds, leaving them crumpled on the canvas before they even knew what hit them. His power wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Fighters lost to him before the first punch was even thrown, their minds consumed by fear. But Brock Lesnar is a different beast entirely. He's no stranger to intimidation. He's fought in the UFC, where he walked into the octagon against killers and walked out with championship gold. He's conquered the world of professional wrestling, tossing legends around like ragdolls. And most importantly, he's never been afraid of a fight. As the two men stand across from each other, the sheer contrast is staggering. Tyson, compact and explosive, eyes burning with the same fury that made him the youngest heavyweight champion in history. Lesnar, towering and massive, a walking mountain of muscle, his expression as cold and unreadable as ever. There's no trash talk now. No posturing. Just a moment of silence before chaos erupts. The referee steps between them, giving final instructions, but neither man is really listening. Their focus is locked, their bodies coiled like predators, ready to strike. The crowd swells, anticipation reaching its breaking point. The bell is about to ring. The fight of the century is here. And in just a matter of moments, the world will witness an explosion of violence that will be talked about for generations. But before we get to that first punch, let's take a step back. How did we get here? What led to this moment? And more importantly, who truly has the upper hand? Because in a fight like this, predictions are dangerous. Anything can happen. And when it does, the world won't be able to look away. The moment Tyson and Lesnar came face to face, the world seemed to pause. The weight of history, of speculation, of years spent debating what if, all came crashing into reality. But to truly understand the magnitude of this battle, you have to look at what brought these two warriors to this point. Their paths were never supposed to cross. Tyson, a product of the streets, a fighter who rose from nothing to become the most feared boxer of his generation. Lesnar, a genetic anomaly, molded through wrestling mats and cages, built to dominate with overwhelming force. They were legends in their own right, yet fate had drawn them into the same storm. Mike Tyson's legacy was carved in blood and brutality. From the moment he stepped into the ring as a young fighter, it was clear he was different. He wasn't just fighting for victory. He was fighting to destroy. His hands were hammers, his movement like a predator stalking prey, and his mindset, at his peak, was that of a man possessed. In his prime, Tyson didn't just win, he annihilated. But as the years passed, as personal demons, controversy, and the unforgiving nature of time took their toll, the invincible aura began to fade. Yet even now, well past the years when most fighters have faded into obscurity, the fire still burned in his eyes. The hunger never left. And when the whispers of a challenge reached him, he didn't hesitate. Brock Lesnar, on the other hand, had spent his life proving that size and power were more than just advantages, they were weapons. From a young age, he dominated amateur wrestling, an unstoppable force on the mat. But it wasn't enough. He wanted more. The world of professional wrestling gave him a stage, a place where he could impose his will and showcase his unmatched athleticism. But even that wasn't enough. The UFC called, and Lesnar answered with the same ferocity he brought to every challenge. People doubted him, dismissed him as a showman stepping into a world he didn't belong in. He shut them all up. One by one, he tore through the heavyweight division, winning the UFC championship in record time. He wasn't just strong, he was a machine, a rare blend of speed, power, and wrestling ability that made him a nightmare for anyone who stood across from him. The idea of Tyson versus Lesnar started as nothing more than a fantasy, a hypothetical debate among fans. A dream fight that belonged in discussions, not reality. But the world of combat sports thrives on the impossible. When the right money, the right people, and the right circumstances aligned, the dream became something more. What started as speculation turned into negotiation, and before long, it was official. The baddest man on the planet would step into the ring against the beast incarnate. The rules. Boxing, but with modifications. Lesnar would have to fight by Tyson's rules, but there would be allowances for clinching, for grappling within a limited scope, just enough to make things interesting, just enough to make it dangerous for both men. Not everyone believed it was a good idea. Some thought it was a mismatch. Tyson was a boxer, Lesnar a wrestler. Two different worlds. But those who understood the psychology of fighting knew better. This wasn't about sport. This was about pride, about proving dominance in the most primal way possible. The buildup was unlike anything seen in years. Press conferences turned into battlegrounds, with Tyson's cold, calculating confidence clashing against Lesnar's quiet but unmistakable menace. The stare-downs were intense, neither man willing to look away first. Tyson spoke of experience, of his legendary power. Lesnar didn't need words, his presence alone was enough to send a message. Every time they shared a stage, the tension thickened. The world watched, waiting. Training camps were brutal. Tyson's team focused on speed, head movement, and relentless aggression. They knew he couldn't afford to let Lesnar grab hold of him. He had to get in, do damage, and get out. Lesnar's camp, on the other hand, worked on pressure, durability, and cutting off the ring. They knew that if he could withstand the early storm, if he could get Tyson against the ropes, it would be his fight to win. As fight night approached, opinions were divided. Boxing purists believed Tyson's power and experience would be too much. MMA fans argued that Lesnar's sheer size and physicality would overwhelm the former champion. But when the two men stood across from each other, when the final seconds before the bell counted down, the only opinions that mattered were their own. The stadium pulsed with energy. The camera zoomed in on Tyson's expression, calm, focused, dangerous. Then to Lesnar, stoic, a mountain of destruction waiting to be unleashed. The crowd grew louder, the anticipation reaching unbearable levels. The bell was about to ring, and the fight that no one ever thought would happen was seconds away from beginning. The bell rang, and in an instant, the world's most anticipated fight was underway. Tyson lunged forward like a coiled spring, his signature peek-a-boo stance tight, head bobbing, fists loaded with the kind of power that had sent countless men crashing to the canvas. Lesnar didn't flinch. He stood his ground, hands high, moving with surprising agility for a man of his size. The crowd roared as Tyson unleashed his first combination, a left hook to the body, followed by a right hand aimed straight for Lesnar's chin. The sheer speed of the punches was something the beast had never faced before. He managed to block the right hand, but the body shot landed flush, forcing him to exhale sharply. Tyson pressed forward, knowing he had to close the distance before Lesnar could use his reach and size. The game plan was clear. Don't give the bigger man room to breathe. Don't let him dictate the pace. Lesnar, however, had plans of his own. As Tyson stepped in for another attack, Lesnar threw out a stiff jab, stopping him in his tracks for a split second, just long enough to land a short right hand that sent a jolt through Tyson's body. The impact wasn't enough to do real damage, but it was a reminder that Lesnar wasn't here to be bullied. The opening minute was a battle for control. Tyson ducked, weaved, and fired shots in rapid succession, targeting Lesnar's ribs, testing his durability. Lesnar, despite being a relative newcomer to the sweet science, showed remarkable composure. He kept his forearms tight, absorbed the punishment, and waited. Then, in a moment that no one saw coming, he did something completely unexpected. Instead of backing away or covering up, he reached forward, clenched Tyson, and drove him backward with pure brute strength. The referee immediately rushed in, warning Lesnar that excessive holding wouldn't be tolerated, but the damage was done. Tyson, for the first time in the fight, looked momentarily off balance, his feet not quite where he wanted them to be. Lesnar had just sent a message. This wasn't going to be a traditional boxing match. He wasn't here to play by the script. Tyson nodded, almost as if he understood. Then he smirked. The second round began, and Lesnar started using his jab more, keeping Tyson at bay, forcing him to work harder to get inside. But Tyson was relentless. He slipped past a jab, launched a brutal right hook, and this time it landed clean. Lesnar's head snapped to the side, sweat flying through the air as the force of the punch sent a tremor through his massive frame. The crowd exploded. Tyson had found his mark. Lesnar staggered for half a second, but he didn't fall. Instead, something in his eyes changed. He wasn't just here to survive, he was here to prove a point. And that's when the fight took a turn that no one expected. As Tyson moved in for the finish, Lesnar didn't retreat. He didn't cover up. He stepped into the fire and unleashed a thunderous uppercut, one that carried every bit of his 280-pound frame behind it. The punch connected, catching Tyson square on the chin, snapping his head back. For the first time in a long, long time, the legendary Iron Mike was rocked. The arena fell into a stunned silence for a brief moment, the impact echoing through the air like a gunshot. Tyson's knees bent slightly, but he refused to go down. His eyes burned with fury, but there was no denying it. Lesnar had just done what very few men had ever managed to do. He had hurt Mike Tyson, but the fight was far from over. Tyson reset his stance, shook off the cobwebs, and stared straight into Lesnar's cold, unflinching eyes. The beast had drawn blood, But all he had done was awaken something even more dangerous. The next few minutes would determine everything. The fight had just reached a level no one had predicted. And now it was truly war. Tyson blinked away the sting of the uppercut, his jaw tightening as he steadied himself. He had been here before, hit hard, shaken, tested. But he had never been broken, and he wasn't about to let it happen now. Lesnar, sensing an opening, stepped forward, looking to impose his will, but he hesitated for just a second. That was all Tyson needed. With lightning speed, he slipped under a lazy jab and buried a left hook deep into Lesnar's ribs, the kind of punch that had shattered men's confidence and bodies alike. A loud grunt escaped from Lesnar's lips as he instinctively lowered his elbow to protect his side, but Tyson wasn't done. With the precision of a master and the fury of a man possessed, he unleashed a right hook that exploded against Lesnar's temple. The beast staggered, his massive legs momentarily betraying him. The crowd erupted as Tyson pressed forward, unleashing a flurry of punches that made the ropes tremble as Lesnar was driven back. The referee watched closely, ready to step in if necessary, but Lesnar refused to fall. His body absorbed the punishment, his instincts telling him to survive at all costs. For a moment, it looked like the fight was over. Tyson was relentless, his fists a blur, each punch landing with the force of a sledgehammer. But just when it seemed like Lesnar was about to crumble, he did something that sent shockwaves through the arena. Instead of covering up or backing away, he surged forward, wrapping his massive arms around Tyson in a desperate clinch, using every ounce of his strength to squeeze and smother the smaller man. Tyson struggled, twisting and turning, trying to free himself, but Lesnar's grip was vice-like. He drove his weight into Tyson, forcing him back toward the ropes, making him carry his massive frame. The referee rushed in, warning Lesnar again about excessive holding, and as he pried them apart, both men took a half step back, breathing heavily. The moment they were separated, Tyson exploded again, but this time, Lesnar was ready. He dipped low, avoiding the left hook, and launched an overhand right that connected with Tyson's temple. The force sent him stumbling sideways. The stadium gasped. Tyson, the man who had terrorized heavyweights for decades, was now visibly hurt. Lesnar saw his chance and went in for the kill. He threw another right hand, this one even bigger, but at the last second, Tyson twisted his body just enough for it to graze past his head. And then it happened. Tyson planted his feet, pivoted, and uncorked a short, devastating right uppercut that landed with surgical precision. The impact was sickening, a crack that echoed through the arena. Lesnar's head snapped back, his legs buckled, and for the first time in the fight, the beast's body betrayed him. He crashed onto the canvas, his massive frame sprawled out, his arms motionless. The referee immediately started the count, but the moment his hand reached 6, it was clear Lesnar wasn't getting up. The stadium erupted as Tyson raised his gloves, sweat dripping from his brow, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. He had done it. The impossible fight, the battle that had defied logic, had ended the way so many of Tyson's fights had his opponent unconscious, his victory undeniable. But just when the celebrations began, an eerie silence fell over the crowd. Lesnar, still on the mat, wasn't moving. The medical team rushed in, checking on him, whispering instructions. Tyson's expression changed from triumph to concern as he watched from the corner, his breathing still heavy. Then, in a moment that no one expected, Lesnar's fingers twitched, his eyelids fluttered, and suddenly, with the sheer willpower of a man who refused to stay down, he tried to sit up. The doctors stopped him, checking for any serious damage, but the message was clear: Lesnar wasn't just tough. He was something beyond that. Minutes passed before Lesnar finally got to his feet, his legs still unsteady but his spirit unbroken. He locked eyes with Tyson, and in a moment that defied the brutality of the battle they had just waged, he nodded. A silent acknowledgement. Not of defeat, but of respect. Tyson, the warrior who had built his legend on knocking men out, returned the nod. No words were needed. They had both just been through something that only they could understand. The fight would be debated for years. Some would argue that Tyson's experience had won the day, that his power was still as lethal as ever. Others would claim that Lesnar had proven his toughness, his refusal to quit making him just as legendary in defeat as he would have been in victory. But one thing was undeniable: this wasn't just a fight. It was a war between two men who had nothing left to prove, yet everything to fight for. As the cameras flashed and the post-fight interviews began, one reporter asked Tyson if this was the last time he would step into the ring. He let out a small chuckle, wiped the sweat from his face, and said, "Never say never." Lesnar, still gathering himself, was asked if he would ever consider stepping into a boxing ring again. He smirked, shook his head slightly, and simply said, "I'll fight anyone." The story of Mike Tyson vs. Brock Lesnar didn't end when the final bell rang. It became a legend, one that fight fans would tell for generations. Two titans, two worlds colliding, and a night that no one would ever forget.